Yo, this is Aluf. You got pretty big balls to watch Torian's YouTube videos.
Ever since last year, FaZe Clan, with their incredible squad that obviously became one of the best in the world, later on became the #1 team in the world, won something ludicrous that year, like I think 4 big titles, obviously 3 in somewhat dominant fashion towards the end of the year. Ever since that team came along, became one of the top teams, we had the mousesports team do their big player shuffle, become a top side themselves. On a lower level, we had Penta with people like Sonny. When all of this took place, people were able to see the upside of having international teams. The very simple upside is quite a clear one. It's clearly what motivated people to make these teams. Is first of all, there are some players who come from countries, Oscar from Czech Republic, Guardian from Slovakia, Nico from Bosnia, who could not have a team from either their country or their entire region that could possibly facilitate them being a top player and having top accomplishments. But individually, they are some of the best players in the entire world and they are star carries. And so if you bring them into your squad, and your squad is a lesser squad from the Netherlands or Denmark or some other country, well, maybe not Denmark, I meant Germany more for that one, somewhere like that, odds are you could get it much more firepower and have a much higher ceiling to your team and a chance to win that you wouldn't have if you just recruited local talents alone. So it's worth the gamble of whatever you give up to get that great player and therefore have a game changer that means you could actually win tournaments or place very highly. But what we hadn't seen, and this is the way it is with everything, how it would play out in terms of negatives. What would actually manifest? What would the long-term consequences be of having an international squad, and especially a very international squad, where maybe 4 or 5 players are all from totally different countries? Because just like with formats, when we first changed to the Swiss system, we were all enjoying the upsides of it. It seemed like it was pretty cool, pretty fun. We quickly found out the flaws of unseeded Swiss system, some of the aspects that aren't as cool, some of the elements that actually spoil some of the tournaments, and many of us actually want to just go back to GSL best of 3 system. So now we've had, I think, a chance to see the good part about international teams, and there clearly are benefits, and some people should go the international route, and also some of the flaws as to why not only should some teams not go the international route, but I think there should be a healthy compromise in the middle that currently not many people reach, but there are some examples already out there which I think will showcase exactly why people shouldn't go as extreme in terms of having international teams. So the topic of this video is that Stiko exposes the flaws of these international teams. Now the reason why that is because mousesports at the early part of the year was one of the absolute best teams in the world, but at the time where I call them like a placeholder top team, because at the time we hadn't had the Astralis team really come online. We hadn't had Na'Vi get rolling with Electronic. Team Liquid hadn't actually gotten their legs under them in the same way at that point in time. There's a whole bunch of teams out there who weren't developed enough to really push the mousesports team off the top. But not only did the team get pushed off the top, and to be fair, they were already starting to slide down with Stiko, but because of the form of the team since they've kicked Stiko and then replaced him with Snax, this has been a hot topic of discussion. And I have to say, a lot of it's very simplistic. Like, even though I thought the lineup with Stiko overall was better in terms of consistency, and what I saw with the eye test in the game looked like they had more cohesion, better map pool, better way of matching up against top teams generally, even if they often lost to the teams above them. Even though that's the case, I don't think it's as simplistic as just bring Stiko back and kick Snax. I don't think reverting the decision necessarily does what you wanted, but the approach of bringing in Snax, I also think didn't work the way they wanted, because mousesports went from a top 5 team in the world, which quite frankly, they might still be ranked top 5 now, I'm sure, because of the 1 ESL New York. But the difference is, they look from the eye test now like a top 8 team that just has more upset potential to get wins every now and then, and therefore go up to a top 5 maybe. But I think, as you see from results like Star Series, they'll start to drop down again. Whereas before, mousesports looked like a top 5 team, and sure, they were probably hard stuck at number 5, if I'm being honest. And they weren't probably going to go higher, except maybe one spot, and maybe they could go one lower, but the consistency was a lot better, and quite frankly, the Counter-Strike was a lot better, and people's form generally seemed to be a lot better across the board, with the exception perhaps of Sonny, who has somewhat shone since the team somewhat went to shit in some degree, in terms of the team element, not all of the individual players. Now that move, as I've alluded to, basically came to give them a chance to raise their ceiling, which it did, as you saw them winning this big ESL New York event. The problem is, it raised their ceiling and it lowered the floor, as I've kind of alluded to. Hence, they won ESL New York, but also went out the major 0-3, also went out in the Swiss system of a fairly weak StarLadder field. Now, there was an interview, and this is what sparked a lot of this discussion, with Sonny, star player of mousesports currently, where he talked about the fact, it was with HLTV.org, that one of Sticko's big effects on the team, and one thing that you only really noticed when he'd gone, was that when other players in the team were playing and Sticko died, he would take over, comming certain information that he would see on their screen that they weren't seeing when he was watching their POV, or allowing them to not have to comm so that he could talk and they could coordinate in a clutch or a retake or something like that. And obviously you can see how that would inherently have a lot of value. For anyone who doesn't know, there are many pro players who either have limited comms or just the way their brain works means they aren't as good at comming. Then add in that they're all different shared nationalities and that they're all using the shared second language or third language of English. And it's understandable why a guy like Sticko, pretty cerebral player, someone who has a very team-focused mentality, someone who obviously died a lot in the team, and by the way, someone who has good English and is a fairly eloquent speaker, would be good at doing that and better than certain other players in the team. You look at Mousesports especially, they have a number of players who are very kind of solitary figures, aren't very social guys generally, and aren't exactly super talkative if you think of some of the names in the team. Oscar, Sonny, Rops is very young. You know, there's a lot of players where it's quite easy to speculate, and I don't have to speculate, Marcus, that they're not super vocal guys all in all. Now, in this scenario, having talked to him myself, he was a player, Sticko, who had a very good mentality and attitude for helping his teammates, playing for the team more than just himself, being able to sacrifice, and crucially, not only comming, but in-game being able to amplify the carry potential of other players. That's why, in my opinion, Rops has gotten a bit worse since Sticko left. Rops' individual games dropped off a bit, and he's had some of his spots seemingly taken by Snacks. Oscar, still a very good player, but looks even more fragile. I think Sticko did a lot for him. Obviously, he'd played with him in Hellraisers in the past. He kind of knows the mentality of what Oscar needs, and he's someone who's not critical of Oscar, where some of the other members are to some degree. So this really, to me, highlights what the big weaknesses are of these fully international teams, and the thing that kept them from being able to make it to the absolute top often was always going to be communication. Now, that's not literal entirely, as in, it doesn't always mean they can't communicate at all, and they can't talk and they can't do call-outs. Sometimes that can be a clear issue, as in the Mousesports case, or the communication is better in the case of having someone basically who made up for and patched up the communications. But I also mean culturally, like how you communicate culturally, how you get along, the balance of personalities in a team, the hierarchy, whether this person respects this person, whether this person perceives them to respect him, how you argue, how you resolve conflicts and disputes, how you even just envision the game based on where you come from and how they see the game. Now, this is all leading and contributing to the chemistry that you have as a team. That's not only like personalities, therefore how you get along in the morale, but also how you actually play in the game. Because you look at the really international squads, and I would pick ones like this. FaZe and Mouse are incredibly international, all different nationalities. MIBR, sure, is only 2 nationalities, but because 3 of them are Brazilian, they have to speak in English, and then the people speaking in English, the Americans, have no basis from playing with Brazilians long term. That is a pretty radical mix altogether. There's no real connection between Brazil and United States of America in terms of culture or language, shared qualities of play, practice, how they all came up, etc., except that their Brazilian players play in North America. That's about it. You look at these squads, they all have the same hallmarks. Tons of skill, tons of players who could be star players on their own in other squads. That's the reason you make these moves. You want to stack star players together because you've been a star player in a team and you haven't won the big championship. You think, fuck, if I had other help on my team, some other superstar player who took some of the load up, I'd win all the tournaments, right? That's why you do it. You want to upgrade the skill factor. But you also look at them. Another hallmark of these 3 teams is there's not much in terms of tactical depth. They generally get by on really good, like loose mid-round calling from their in-game leaders who are specialists at that. And in fact, in all cases except FaZe, these are generally in-game leaders who can also frag a little bit. They can also make up for some of the flaws of the team in terms of team play by adding even more firepower to the equation and going that route to try and win. Now, sure, one of the reasons they don't have as much tactical depth is that is already going to be an obvious factor of overloading in raw individual skill and star players because they don't have the same mentality for playing certain roles and being the glue guy and sacrificing, etc. So that is going to make it a lot harder. But I think it also suggests that it's not as easy to implement a deep tactical system because of the problems with comms and chemistry and the roles not being as naturally sorted and understood. You've got to add in, they also tend, quite frankly, not to have great tactical in-game leaders. Like, I know people are going to think of Fallen as a great tactical in-game leader. That's from a couple of years ago, though, mate. You think of Chris J, not particularly a great tactical in-game leader. You think of Carrigan, he certainly has a great mind for the game and is a great in-game leader, but it's not a tactical style that he's even trying to implement there. It's also worth pointing out these teams generally aren't great in terms of the team play. FaZe has some of the craziest firepower of all time and the most MVP candidates in one team, and their team play is basically what's let them down in a lot of situations, especially on T sides. You look at someone like the MIBR guys, again, really good players, still like a bit of cohesion in team play, especially compared to the old SK and MIBR lineups. Mousesports with Sticko doing his little like OP comms had some solid team play, not among the best. With this lineup with Snax, they have very poor team play actually, despite having some really, really high skilled players. Now, you contrast that to teams that are generally not having as many nationalities and these same problems. Astralis, Team Liquid, Big. These teams have much better team play, much better tactical depth, and a much better tactical system built into the squad and seemingly communication within the squad. Now, some of the lack of team play, sure, down to lack of chemistry as well, right? You don't see the same comeback potential. You don't see the same poise in a big game from these squads. Beyond fragging their way out of trouble, which they can obviously do with that much skill. You also, quite frankly, don't see the same kind of morale or kind of fighting team spirit or belief in the squad. I mean, FaZe is the ultimate example of this because they've won many championships. They've had an amazing resume. They're already one of the greatest. They're already a top 10 lineup to ever play CSGO. But you look at them with the eye test and you look at them in tough situations. They don't have a lot of poise, actually. They don't have a lot of comeback potential in the same way, except for fragging. They don't have like a great team spirit where everyone believes in everyone and it's like one of the truly great teams in terms of harmony and chemistry. They don't really have those qualities. They're making up for it by maxing out certain other stats on the top trumps card, as it were, in that sense. Now, there are some misleading international teams which might make people think, well, what about this team? They're an international team and they had a lot of those qualities, Thorin. Let's go through some of those, shall we? So let's start with Na'Vi, because obviously they've played with Ukrainian and Russian players for many, many years. Now, CIS region is CIS region. Ukraine and Russia have a massive shared cultural heritage and even speak the same language. Like, sure, Ukrainian is a language, but first of all, Ukrainian is similar to Russian, and all the Ukrainian players can speak Russian, and all the Russian players obviously can understand Ukrainian if they were to speak that, and they're not, they're generally just speaking Russian in these teams anyway. So that's actually a very shared heritage. Then you add in Guardian's the only real outlier that got thrown into the Russian scene there, and Guardian's Guardian. He's a mega individual player, a very individualistic player, and he had his own role carved out for him within a machinery where all he had to do was go to those spots and shoot people with the AWP. He didn't have to do crazy comms at all, and he was the main star player. Then you think of some of the Nordic teams where you have a team like Heroic, where you have some Danish and Swedish players together, or you have a Norwegian player playing with some Swedish players. Again, similar culture, shared history, Heroic, NIP, these teams, it makes sense as to why they can work together. Team Liquid realistically only has one international player. Canadians and Americans have such a shared history and so many similarities. They are more alike than any other countries are to each of them. And then you add in, they've only really got one international player in Taco, who's a Brazilian. And quite frankly, it's a very minimal issue because he himself is a Sticko type character. He's a very supportive element, a guy who knows how to calm, knows how to play his role, isn't going to be selfish at all. Seems like he gets along with people in the team, and all the rest of the team doesn't have these issues. Then add in finally Big, who, yes, okay, let's be real, they're just a German team who has a UK player. They're not like a truly international squad, like all different players. And realistically, Smooya is a very individualistic playing style anyway. He's still very young to the team, hasn't played in the team for that long. And actually, they've already cited, it's been touted from rumours, and I've heard things behind the scenes myself, that there have been some problems in the team actually, for exactly these reasons: communication, cultural difference, attitude difference that stems from cultural difference. So I don't think if it's fair to call those teams, which do have very good basis of tactics, or good role distribution, or consistency, or combat, I don't think it's fair to call those international teams in the context of what we're talking about here. We're talking about the extreme international teams. Now, interestingly, I have a solution for you. And if you've been following what I just laid out there, you might be able to guess what it is. It is to make teams that aren't as extremely wide in terms of how many nationalities they have and how different the culture gap can be in the clashes within the team and the comms problems. That's the problem. A team like FaZe went to the extreme. Now, if instead you had a core of players, ideally, I think the team play core, and it's hopefully an established core that's played together for a year or 2 years, and they all know each other, they all team play well, they all come very well, and then you bring in 1 or 2 big star names, ideally star players, not the other pieces, because then they can just go out there, frag, and you play around them. So somewhat similar to the NOA team from 2004. Or 2003 as well. This, for me, would be a better way to get a compromise of having some better comms, chemistry, team play, all the rest of it, and having shared morale, etc., but still having the firepower aspect that is what you want from the international players and why you bring them in the first place. Like, I'll give you a couple of examples of lineups that I think if you made tomorrow, these could be fucking incredible lineups that could do basically almost anything. So here's one for you, right? Obviously, Astralis, I can't take any players from there. Why would they change? They've got all the best Danish players generally. I could make maybe one change. They're doing fabulous. They wouldn't make a player change. So I've got to pick a team that might make a change. Here's one. Give me the North lineup that existed earlier this year. Go back to Star Series Season 5, the one that made it to the semi-finals. It was the team that was MSL, AZ, Valde, Mertz, and who would the fifth have been in that? Kirby, obviously. This lineup, right? Okay, give me the base of this team. So give me MSL, good tactical in-game leader, solid ability to use people in different roles. Give me AZ, his sidekick, the guy who's on the same page as him, good supportive player, all-around talent generally. Give me Valde, one of the most complete players we have in the game right now, strong fragging power, but maybe shouldn't be your main superstar, but could be an absolutely fantastic all-around player. Now give me 2-star players. I'll take them from Mousesports, this dysfunctional team. Give me Sonny, amazing, like aggressive rifle player, but has very good game sense as well. Certain maps he just dominates. He clearly can be one of your main carries. Give me him. You know what? Give me his other mate from Mousesports. Give me Oscar, star AWPer, guy who needs the game set up for him, but can AWP at an incredibly high level, can be an MVP player. You give me that tactical base, team player base, and those star players, and let MSL figure out how to use them, and get a basic level of comms of English, because the Danish players have pretty good English, and with the exception of maybe Oscar, they generally all have pretty decent English in this team. I think that lineup could fucking bang out, and they would not have the same problems that a Mousesports has. Here's another one. I'll give you an even higher level one. Here's how you fix FaZe Clan. So give me FaZe Clan, and what I'll do is this. I'll take out Carrigan. It's obviously not working out with him. Take out Rain, very skilled player, but again, very different to a lot of the other players. Hasn't been in great form. Take out Olofmeister. He had his own personal issues recently. We don't know how long he's going to play the game for. And I've got to replace some of the supportive elements here, right? So all I'm going to keep, obviously, is I'm going to keep Nico, one of the best players in the world, incredible individual carry. And I'm going to keep Guardian, incredibly strong AWPer, who has consistently shown his ability to get back to the top. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some legendary Brazilian players. Give me Fallen, in-game leader, can frag, can play a loose style. Give me Coldzera, amazing star player, but doesn't have to be the guy you funnel all the direct resources into, can be a clean-up kind of player, an all-around game. And then give me Taco, his sidekick, the guy who's worked well with him, the sticko of this team, as it were, who's going to amplify Nico and Guardian and Coldzera. What a great team player base I've got. They obviously are legendary players in terms of combat potential, great fighting spirit and morale. They've been champions before. And then you add in Nico and Guardian, that team would fucking also bang out of control. I think that would be an amazing squad, a great compromise of strengths and weaknesses of what you'd get, and overall would be a team that could challenge for the absolute top of the scene. Because obviously one of the flaws of these big teams, as you've seen, is not only do they go crazy with the amount of nationalities and cultural backgrounds and the culture clashes, but they tend to just not have any supportive players in, because since you're letting the lunatics run the asylum and all these star players are like, give me another star player, you get a star player, you get a star player, you get a star player. They don't ever pick the supportive players because they don't necessarily know what those guys do for the team. They just see they're not as good at fragging, and then they lose the game while they're sat watching that guy die in a 1v1. They go, I'd rather have fucking Guardian than him. That's why if you look at these international squads that were doing better, they had a Sticko, they had a Tackle, but those are very rare examples in these international squads. Where is the NBK of one of these teams? Could have been in a Mousesports, obviously, or a FaZe. Where's the Zipniks? Obviously, now he's in Astralis, but there was a time when he wasn't in the best team in the world. Where's there even a Rubino, someone who showed he could do it for North? Again, I'd love to see him get a try in a Mousesports type team. These are the players who, it's reducing some of the raw firepower, but it's putting you in a better position to win because you've got the supportive element and also who can lay a team player foundation. Now, not to go away from this approach, because I don't think you should just abandon it completely. Like I said, some of these players are so special, Guardian, Nico, Oscar, that it's worth Sonny, it's worth taking the risk. It's worth trying to get them in. But it's not worth also getting 3 or 4 other players who might not be as good in that particular sense. So I would personally say some of these aspects help your team, so take that aspect, and some of them don't. So throw that one away and have the rest of it be a core team. It's not about just abandoning this approach and go back to what we had before. I like that this exists as well as the other approach, but let's find a smarter solution / compromise in the middle to make these squads work. And let's look at what has worked with these teams. Because one of the biggest problems right now is one of the reasons I think Astralis is so dominant is exactly because the scene is set up with so many of the names below them are these kinds of teams. You look at the top 2 teams in the world, okay, so top 3 teams in the world, okay, are going to be Astralis clearly by far, and then it's between Na'Vi and Team Liquid, right? Well, Na'Vi is just basically a CIS squad, so they have a shared cultural heritage, history. Astralis obviously all from the same country, and then Team Liquid, as I said, somewhat international in a way that benefited them. They've got an amazing support player who has a history of winning, but other than that, all from the same culture. Then you look at the teams below them. Those are the monster teams with all the super sick players, but who aren't winning the big tournaments generally at the moment and can't get up to the same level of consistency. You look at Astralis, they have great communication. You can't fuck with them, even if you're all on the same page. But if you're not, you're going to have an even harder time. They've got great chemistry. Again, some of the best we've seen. You might be able to get some if you have a better team play core. If you don't, you're going to be in deep shit. You're already down 2 factors against them. They've got great tactical depth. Most of these international teams do not have that. They've got very good players. Now, admittedly, you can beat them in that sense. I actually think some of the Astralis players are inflated because of how good their numbers are, because of how dominant the team is, and the fact that they're winning now makes people in their brain overvalue some of the players. Like, it's just not plausible that adding one player made like every player in Astralis 1.5 times better. If you believe that, then you basically believe in magic and the concept of like skill vampires or like some fucking voodoo power making them more. It just doesn't make any sense overall, does it? They didn't get that much better mechanically and at the raw elements of the game, did they? Then you've got to look at this factor. It's going to be tough to beat a squad like that with the advantages of Astralis, with 5 different nationalities, with players who don't come from the same background, who have limited or in any way flawed comms, who lack for a certain role and certain supportive elements and can only frag, whereas Astralis can do it all in the game. So you can see the flaws of the international teams are present. They are exposed by what happened with Stickor and Mousesports, but they're even more important to address and in the future when we build big international teams, because otherwise teams like Astralis are going to dominate the scene and run away with it, and we're not going to be able to get the squads that can properly challenge them. This video was kindly supported by Andreas Snazor Westerland, Dean Tanglis, Gardiner Wilson, Landon Thompson, Nate D.O.G.G, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, James Harding, Daniel Yordanov, Vexy, Robert Baxter, and a special thanks goes out, as always, to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Would you fancy a few teasers for what's coming up in my content? How about taking part in an esports discussion with me? Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.